Also now at 7, OnlyFans model Courtney Clenney back in court today. Her attorneys playing dramatic video to prove she acted in self-defense in the stabbing death of her boyfriend.
He was lying in a pool of blood and she was posing in a bikini. That's how first responders found them inside a luxury Miami apartment. The man was lifeless and the woman was calm, almost too calm. But this man had everything: brains, charm, money, and a smile that could make strangers feel like family. In fact, Christian Toby Obumseli was the kind of person who didn't just walk into a room, he brightened it up. And then one day he ended up like this. No one could have seen it coming, not his coaches, classmates, or family back in Dallas. The youngest in his family, he grew up chasing fun and bringing joy. But behind the laughter and energy was a mind sharper than most. By the time he hit college, he wasn't just a football star. He was making money in stocks, dabbling in crypto, and laying down the bricks of a future most only dream of. At only 25, he was traveling the world, building his empire. Seemed like the only thing missing from his life was love. And then, she happened. A woman walked into his life. And not just any woman. Courtney Taylor, the kind of person who turns heads without trying, who smiles like she has a secret, and whose past is more twisted than her followers ever knew. He thought he had found love, but what he found was the end of everything he knew. Who was Courtney? Born in Midland, Texas, to a family that gave her everything, Courtney Clenney had the world at her feet. Pretty, popular, with a flair for drama and a hunger for attention, she went from high school stages to Instagram fame and then to OnlyFans stardom. With her money rolling in and a million eyes watching her every move, she told the world she had it all figured out. But behind the filters and perfectly posed photos was someone else, someone darker. People laughed when she joked about fights with her exes, about lashing out, throwing things, getting physical. She even bragged about trying to stab someone for flirting with another girl. But no one laughed when they realized those weren't jokes. One of her exes came forward privately admitting that she had tried to stab him, not once but twice, and yet somehow no one stopped her. So how did Christian, the golden boy, the one who seemed untouchable, how did he fall for someone like that? Because what happened next would shake their entire friend group, and soon, the country. Texas. Courtney was born into comfort. Her dad was a financial advisor, the kind of guy who understood numbers, investments, wealth. So money was never a problem for her. Courtney and her sister Morgan grew up in a world where no wish went unfulfilled. She wasn't just a pretty face. Courtney had drive. From gymnastics to horse riding to theater, she did it all. By the time she hit high school, fitness became her obsession. She trained, sculpted, and pushed herself harder than anyone else. Why? Because she knew that college and studies were not for her. Instead, her body was her brand, and she worked it like a pro. Soon, social media started buzzing. Gym selfies, workout videos, that tight blonde ponytail, that bold stare. She knew exactly how to break the internet. And then came the big break: Los Angeles, modeling gigs, Playboy features. Her Instagram literally exploded. But then came something even bigger: OnlyFans. She saw the potential instantly. Exclusive content, direct cash, and full control. She joined, posted, and engaged people. Money flowed in, $3 million worth. In just 3 years on OnlyFans, Courtney made over $3 million. In 2020 alone, she pocketed a jaw-dropping $1 million, and by the next year, that number hit $1.8 million. All this while being called the dream, young, rich, famous, beautiful. But here's the thing: fame has a dark side, and Courtney was about to get swallowed by it. That's when she met Christian Obumseli, or Toby, a tall, handsome, and ambitious Nigerian American. He was smart, smooth, and magnetic. He loved football, worked hard, and had big dreams, and from the moment they met, it was on fire. Weeks in, and they were already inseparable. But passion like that doesn't come without a price. Because soon, Christian started changing. The once lively Toby became quieter, withdrawn. Friends noticed that. They knew that something or someone was pulling him down, and they were right. It was Courtney, who once showered him with affection, had started controlling everything. From his friends to his freedom, his time was totally consumed by her. Arguments became a routine, screams replaced laughter. And then came the pushing and the hitting. At first, it was just his chest, then his shoulders. But it didn't stop there. Christian, blinded by love or maybe hope, made a decision that sealed his fate. He became her assistant and her shadow. He started traveling with her, working for her, catering to her every demand. He was always near, always available, and always in harm's way. Because behind the glamour, Courtney had another side that used to be fueled by alcohol, rage, and chaos. Her nights out in Austin turned frequent. Her dependency on drinks even more so. And as her tolerance dropped, her temper exploded. It wasn't just the glass in Vegas. Police had already seen glimpses of her recklessness because of 2 DUI charges and public altercations. One moment she was smiling for the cameras, the next she was in handcuffs. But the real breakdown wasn't public, it was private. Behind closed doors, Christian was enduring more than anyone imagined. The walls of their Miami apartment, they weren't just hiding secrets. They were absorbing screams. Yet he stayed. He defended her and protected her. But the question is, why would a man with charm, money, and ambition choose to stay in such darkness? However, before he could think clearly, then came April 3rd, 2022. Courtney made a call, her voice eerily composed. Christian was on the floor with a single wound, but it was deep and critical. That night, Courtney was screaming in a Vegas hotel room, hurling a glass at the only man who ever loved her. That night wasn't just a drunken mistake, it was a symptom, a crack in the porcelain life of Courtney Clenney. But that's not even the most chilling part, because what Courtney did next, after the ambulance arrived, after the chaos unfolded, left even the most seasoned detectives stunned. And it started with 5 words that changed everything. I was acting in self-defense. But was she? Or was this a final, desperate performance from a woman who built her life on fantasy? And if she truly believed it was self-defense, why was she caught laughing just minutes after the paramedics left? Yes, even before that, he was lying in a pool of his own blood, while she went live on Instagram. If it was really an act of self-defense, then why did footage show her attacking him before? Why were there bruises on him days earlier? Why was Christian's last text message begging for space? But to understand how things spiraled to this point, we have to rewind way back when Courtney and Toby were just another picture-perfect couple on the internet, smiling, traveling, living in luxury. It wasn't the first time someone had called the cops on them. Police noted a broken glass, a chair tipped over, and a nervous laugh from Courtney saying she felt scrambled. But despite visible bruises, shattered plates, and neighbors hearing shouting matches regularly, no charges were ever filed. Because Toby kept taking her back. Even after nights spent behind bars, Courtney always came home. So why didn't he walk away? The truth is, he tried. Friends said he spoke about it often, about how things felt off, about how her behavior flipped in an instant. One moment affectionate, the next explosive. But every time he packed his bags, she reeled him back in. And in January 2022, they left Texas behind for a fresh start. They moved to Miami, and that's where things got worse. Their new apartment was nothing short of a palace. It was a Unit 2201 Beverly Terrace, the floor-to-ceiling windows, 3 bedrooms, and panoramic views of Biscayne Bay. It was $10,000 a month, all paid by Courtney. She made sure everyone knew that too. If he doesn't behave, I'll kick him out, she'd brag. This is my place. But behind the glitter and high-rises, something snapped. Miami wasn't just a new city. It was a new stage for Courtney. She partied, she disappeared for nights, she returned drunk, being aggressive. Publicly, she called herself toxic. She admitted on podcasts that she hated being told what to do. I only date rich black guys, she said with a smile, but don't boss me around. Toby also tried to keep up, but he wasn't ready for what came next. On April 1st, 2022, the building's security was alerted to another heated argument in Unit 2201. Screaming, crying, slamming doors. 2 days later, Toby was found with a deep wound to the chest. Courtney told police he'd hurt himself and she tried to stop him. But she was just defending herself. And her story kept changing, because neighbors said otherwise. Security footage showed her striking him days before. His texts revealed a desperate man, afraid, isolated, trapped. So was it really self-defense? The answer seemed clear to many. Yet for months, Courtney walked free. She hired high-powered lawyers, she flew to rehab, she gave interviews and branded herself as the victim. But when the police finally released the footage of her attacking him in an elevator over and over, the public turned. Still, Courtney claimed it wasn't what it looked like, until one final detail emerged. She'd gone live on Instagram, minutes after it happened, smiling, singing, and covered in blood. And suddenly everything Toby's family had said made sense. That this wasn't the first time that he had wanted out. He was simply scared. Still, no one stopped it sooner, because the warning signs were everywhere, flashing, screaming, unmissable. How many more red flags need to wave before someone takes action? For example, she stabbed him, someone who loves to play football, in the leg, and he still took her to Vegas. Yeah, you heard that right. Blood on the floor, pain in his eyes, yet by morning he was smiling, pouring drinks, helping her shoot content, and partying like nothing ever happened. But here's the part that will wreck your head. He did all that because he thought it would make her happy. But how does someone get to that point? Why did he stay after everything? Because by now, Courtney wasn't just unpredictable, she was dangerous. Not just to Toby's body, but to his mind, to his soul. And the worst part? She also knew it. And sometimes, she even laughed about it. Their hotel rooms were always trashed, their apartment wrecked like a storm had passed through. And when she ran out of things to break, she went for his clothes, his peace, his pride. Once she hurled every single item of his wardrobe off their Miami balcony, like it was some kind of show. Then the switch flipped. She was sorry. You know, she had to be sorry, because how else do you explain her dropping 10 grand on Louis Vuitton luggage just to say, "My bad"? But these weren't apologies. They were bribes. Bribes for silence, for loyalty, for love. And Toby? He kept accepting them. Because somewhere inside, he still saw her as the girl who inspired him to write poems under sunsets. The girl who made him cry tears of joy. The girl he once dreamed of building forever with. But that girl was gone. Then came the infamous elevator footage. The video most of us have seen. Courtney swinging, Toby shielding. She hit. He backed off, over and over. But when the cops showed up, Toby defended her like every time. Was it fear? Was he worried he'd get blamed too? Or was it something deeper? Something more twisted? Because the letters he wrote, the texts he sent, they weren't from a man who hated her. They were from someone hopelessly in love, but hopelessly broken. "You're the sweetest and most annoying woman I know," he once wrote, "but I would never trade you for anything." Even when she jabbed a knife into his leg, he still woke up happy. He didn't scream, he didn't run, he took her to Vegas. He drank with her, partied with her, helped her shoot content, all while limping on a leg that was throbbing from the night before. "I didn't make you feel bad for stabbing me," he texted her the next day. "I just sucked it up and hoped tomorrow would be better." But what happens when tomorrow isn't better? By March 2022, things had gone from chaotic to catastrophic. The Miami apartment they'd only recently moved into? Already visited by police twice. 12 more calls had been made in the months before. In the final weeks, there were constant threats, constant tension. Courtney was constantly yelling that she wanted him out, even though legally, she couldn't throw him out just like that. But she tried hard to do that, and she even called her mother in for backup, like she needed a second opinion to push him out. But Toby didn't budge. He ended up sleeping on a small couch in the foyer, a tight hallway between the private elevator and the rest of the apartment. That's where he stayed for 6 days in what she mockingly called the elevator room. Then came April 1st, Courtney's mom finally left, and now it was just Courtney and Toby, face to face again. The next day, Courtney was not happy, and guess what? The police were back. Because the next 24 hours would change everything. It was 4:57 p.m. on a stormy day, and the emergency call sent a shiver down the spine of anyone who heard it. "My boyfriend is dying." The frantic voice on the other end could barely be understood. The blood was already pooling around Christian, and Courtney's panic was palpable as she screamed for help. But just hours before, Courtney had been begging the police not to show up. The concierge had already called them, after a scene of screaming and chaos erupted between her and Christian. But when the officers arrived, her story changed. Suddenly, she wanted the police to be there. She even talked about getting a restraining order against him, even though moments before she'd denied it. But you see, something didn't add up here. Courtney's words were scattered, her emotions all over the place. As she spoke with the officers, her story kept shifting. She denied a lot of what the concierge had already told them. It was clear something wasn't right, and she seemed desperate to make herself the victim, fighting for control, trying to push for a restraining order before Christian could do it first. She was doing everything she could to keep things in her favor. But then, just a day after the police had left, something shocking happened. Despite the heated argument and everything that had unfolded earlier, Courtney and Christian had made up. They were back together. Just hours after everything had exploded, they were supposedly fine. But how long could it last? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. On that same stormy day, things took another dark turn. When the 911 call came in, there was no hiding what had happened. Christian was bleeding, unable to feel his arm, and the voice of panic in Courtney's words was unmistakable. It was too late for any kind of reconciliation now. The damage was done. By the time police and paramedics arrived, they found Christian lying in a pool of blood. His life was hanging by a thread. The blood had already spread through the apartment, on the kitchen island, in the master bedroom, and across the living room. But it wasn't just the blood that was unsettling. It was the way Courtney was acting. She was sitting on the floor covered in blood, kissing her dogs, completely detached from the chaos around her. Christian was rushed to the hospital, but the clock was ticking. He was losing too much blood. He'd confessed over the phone that he couldn't feel his arm, and it seemed like no one could get there fast enough. Time was running out. And as for Courtney, she was taken to the police station for questioning, and what followed was even more bizarre. In a 4-hour interrogation, she didn't even ask for a lawyer. She just spoke, rambling, inconsistent, as if trying to make sense of everything that had happened. She was all over the place, emotional and agitated, but the strangest part? She kept calling the events a blur, as if this whole nightmare was just a foggy memory. Could it really be that unclear? Or was she trying to erase something darker? She spoke of the day in fragments. Christian had gone for a walk earlier that afternoon, trying to clear his head after their last argument. He came back with a sandwich and everything was seemingly fine. She had been on the phone with her mother, watching YouTube videos, living in her own world. But what had happened between the moment Christian returned and the moment the blood started flowing? She had never answered that clearly. Courtney's actions seemed to shift between chaos and calm, from begging for police intervention to acting out in a way that only raised more questions. What happened in those final moments of that day would shock everyone. But what came next would send chills down anyone who thought they had all the answers. That night was supposed to be like any other, but it wasn't. It all went sideways because Courtney was furious. Why? Because Toby had stopped sharing his live location with her. Seems minor, right? But to Courtney, it was a huge problem. And you see, there's this app, Find My Friends, that lets you share your location with people you trust. Some couples use it just for safety, but others use it to keep tabs. Toby didn't want to share his location anymore, and that, according to Courtney, was a breaking point. So Toby finally agreed to share it again. But when he asked Courtney to do the same, she refused. That's when things went downhill fast. And according to Courtney, that's when Toby snapped. He allegedly grabbed her by the neck and shoved her to the floor. But it didn't stop there. He called his mom for support, and that only seemed to make him angrier. Toby, according to Courtney, charged at her, and this was where everything went from bad to worse. Courtney, in fear, grabbed a kitchen knife. She yelled, "Don't come any closer." But Toby didn't stop. He kept coming. And in that moment, she threw the knife, not just any throw, but one from about 10 feet away. It was a desperate flung knife. But did she really aim for him, or was it just a warning? Courtney explained it like this: "I just grabbed it and threw it. I wasn't thinking about anything, I just threw it." But it's important to know how she threw it. Was it intentional? She says it wasn't. But can anyone believe that? Here's where it gets even stranger. Instead of calling 911 right away, Courtney called her mom. In the meantime, 13 minutes passed. 13! Those precious minutes could have made all the difference, but they were wasted. Why? She says she didn't know what to say, didn't have time to think, she claimed. But does that make sense? Wouldn't anyone in a situation like this know exactly what happened? And the more Courtney spoke, the more her story fell apart. Then came the most chilling part of all. During her interview, she questioned whether her actions were even justified. "I don't know if it was justified. I was scared, but I don't know," she said. Was she unsure? Or was she trying to buy time, trying to figure out what story would make her look less guilty? And then came the devastating news. 2 hours after that interview, it was confirmed. Toby had passed away. He never made it out of the hospital. The doctors did all they could, but it wasn't enough. He bled out with her name tattooed over his heart. The tattoo was a name he'd once worn like a promise. Now, it sat just inches below the fatal wound that ended everything. This was a kind of detail investigators don't forget, and Courtney in that moment seemed shocked, almost too shocked, because now she had officially become a murderer. When the officers broke the news, her voice cracked. "Christian, he's gone?" she asked, as if she couldn't quite believe it. A shock ran through her words. She cried, begged for a hug, but all of it felt strangely detached. Was this a real reaction, or was it simply an act? Courtney's actions didn't line up with what you'd expect from someone who just lost someone they claimed to love. And with each twist, a new question surfaced, a new layer of suspicion unfurling. But Courtney never stopped talking. Her words, her actions, everything she said felt like an attempt to rewrite the story. And that was all happening without her lawyer. But the real shock wasn't his death, and it was what happened after. Because the moment Courtney Clenney's name surfaced in connection to the scene, the narrative began to shift, fast. From grief to confusion, from heartbreak to headlines, a young, blonde OnlyFans model turned into a killer overnight. The image was too familiar, too marketable. The press ate it up. But the authorities? They did something else. They sent her to a psychiatric facility, under Florida's Baker Act, reserved for emergency mental health situations. But within 48 hours, she was back on the streets, just like that. No charges, no indictment. She was just released. And the reason? Authorities claimed it was an act of self-defense, domestic dispute, an unfortunate accident. Case closed. Clearly, the authorities had bought her story because Christian's family didn't buy it, not for a second. They knew their son, they knew his heart, and they knew something was deeply wrong. Especially when the police wrapped up their investigation in less than a day, hours after arriving at the scene. But what shattered them most? Courtney didn't disappear after his death. She didn't grieve. She didn't reflect. Instead, she partied. 2 days later, she was seen drinking at a bar with her father and brother, laughing, toasting, as if nothing had happened. What shocked people even more wasn't just the footage. It was what she did next. She simply ran from one state to another, staying low, all while claiming she was the victim. As Christian's family launched a GoFundMe just to afford his funeral, Courtney moved 2,000 miles away to Texas and bought herself a luxury mansion, $1.4 million, a 3,000-square-foot hillside property in Lake Point. 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a hot tub, a private deck with sweeping views, paid in full, in cash. She also wired $1.2 million into her father's bank account for what she called safekeeping. But then in a twist no one saw coming, she posted on social media again. It was a new photo with a new caption. She was acting like nothing ever happened, as if Christian's face wasn't plastered across headlines. Meanwhile, Christian's family was drowning in loss, legal fees, and disbelief. But Courtney's version of the story had already reached the public. Christian had been the aggressor. She had only been defending herself. Her lawyer doubled down on it. And strangely, the police had accepted it as well, with no further questions. But Christian's friends couldn't stay silent anymore. They spoke of a relationship that was anything but equal. They recalled nights when she'd explode while Christian stayed quiet. He always played peacemaker. How bruises seemed to appear more often on him than on her. They described her temper, her control, her manipulation, her threats. And as the pressure mounted, so did Courtney's unraveling. She entered a rehab center in Hawaii because of PTSD, substance problems, and depression. But even that felt more like image control than accountability. And while she was hidden away in paradise, prosecutors were working in silence, building their case like a ticking bomb. On August 10th, 2022, it finally detonated. Courtney Clenney was finally arrested. The charges were for murder, something she never thought she'd hear in her life. The reason it took so long? prosecutors only had one shot at convincing the courts she wasn't who she claimed to be. They needed every single piece of evidence lined up perfectly. And what they found was devastating. Besides the elevator footage where she's seen attacking Christian, striking him and cornering him, there were text messages, voicemails, screenshots, more than 12,000 digital exchanges between the two. And when asked about the so-called self-defense claim, Courtney said Christian had grabbed her by the throat and slammed her. But there were no visible marks on her, not on her neck, not on her body. Plus, here's where it gets even darker. Everyone knew that this wasn't the first time for her. Courtney had been arrested in Las Vegas a year prior for the domestic violence with the same man, in the same pattern. Meanwhile, Courtney's exes also came in front to testify. Dig deeper and you'll find more. An ex-boyfriend who said she once tried to stab him. His name is bodybuilder Sean Roden, whose jaw she allegedly broke in 2017. He never spoke about it because he was cheating on his wife with her. He stayed silent to protect himself. So Courtney's rage had always been there, just hidden behind filters and bikinis, masked by charm and protected by privilege. But now it was time for the final blow. Every friend, every roommate, every mutual contact between her and Christian said the same thing. She was the aggressor. He tried to make it work. He loved her. But she was dangerous. Now the truth is in the open, but one question still haunts this entire case. How many people saw the signs and looked away? And more chilling, what if Christian wasn't the first and might not have been the last? During or after her interview with officers, Courtney's case has only become more prominent in the media. As for the authorities, they've shown no interest in presenting more information to the public. And somehow, even from the grave, Christian has managed to shed more light on their toxic relationship through several secret recordings. In one of those recordings, Courtney can be heard berating him for talking to another woman before making a racially charged remark. "Just shut up and let me slide. Give me my phone. You have your phone," she says. Christian replies calmly, explaining, "I was on a bike ride and she passed me. I said hi." But Courtney cuts him off, yelling at him. In another clip, Christian recorded them arguing in a hotel lobby. The moment he mentions she had put her hands on him, Courtney lowers her voice and whispers, almost as if afraid someone might overhear. "Decide whether or not you're done," she snaps. "I am mad that you told me to come inside right now. I apologize, but you hit me." Following her arrest and with all the damning evidence now public, Courtney faces one of the most highly anticipated trials in recent memory. The internet erupted, her fans turned, even her accounts got paused. And that million-dollar empire? It began to crack. Her defense tried to block all of Christian's secret recordings from being admitted, but the judge shut that down. Her request to block all other evidence from public access was straight out denied. Her defense also filed a motion for her release on bond, but the judge ruled against it, citing the high probability that she committed the crime and noting her massive bank balance as a risk for fleeing. So for the time being, she remained behind bars. In Florida, as convicted of second-degree charges, Courtney was looking at life imprisonment, with a minimum of 16 years and 9 months. Her father, one of her loudest defenders, even claimed he had no idea about her OnlyFans career. Considering how central it was to her lifestyle, can he really say he knows the real Courtney? And despite how widely available her content is online, it's strange that no one in her family knew. How else could they explain her rapid rise in wealth? You see, that's a valid question that exposes some shady things in the family. She made $3 million showing off online, and now she's sitting in a jail cell. The moment Courtney Clenney was arrested in August 2022, headlines exploded. Influencer, model, OnlyFans star, whatever name the internet had given her, it didn't matter anymore. Prosecutors didn't just call her dangerous, they called her a flight risk. Why? Because shortly after the incident, she transferred $1.1 million to her dad quietly. Her defense tried to paint a different picture. They said the money was gone and Clenney was broke now. Her OnlyFans was deleted and her endorsements had disappeared like smoke. She had nothing left, not even freedom, but the judge wasn't buying it. The history she carried, including a trail of ignored court orders from other places, didn't help. Then came October 2024, a long courtroom drama. Clenney's defense team brought in a knife-throwing expert, trying to convince the court that she threw the knife at Christian Obumseli from across the room. They also claimed that it wasn't up close and it was out of fear. The defense filmed the whole demo, blade after blade sinking into pork flesh, meant to mimic a human body. A pathologist even vouched for it, saying pig tissue is eerily similar to ours. But the prosecution? They weren't impressed. They called it a circus. They pointed out that the knife thrower was nothing like Clenney in build or strength. They questioned the distance, the force, the very idea that a person under stress could make such a precise and powerful throw. Was it self-protection? Or something else entirely? But on the prosecution's part, the medical report put the final nail in the coffin. Courtney claimed she had thrown the knife from across the room, but the examiner's findings told a different tale. It was a downward thrust, 3 inches deep, straight into his chest, right above the tattoo of her name. The wound pierced his subclavian artery. There was no way it was an accident. No way it was from a distance. It had to be close and purely intentional. The examiner went on record. If someone threw a knife, it would likely bounce off. To penetrate 3 inches into the chest? That takes force, deliberate force. And just when it seemed like that demonstration would take center stage, June 2024 dropped a bombshell. All the evidence were suddenly gone, and not because it didn't exist, but because it couldn't be used. Private iCloud messages between Clenney's mom and their lawyer had been scooped up by prosecutors. These were messages that allegedly exposed an attempt to dig into Obumseli's laptop. But since those conversations were between a client and their attorney, the judge struck them from the record. Just like that, the computer-related charges against Clenney and her parents were dropped. Which begs the question, what were they trying to find on that laptop? And why risk everything to get to it? That wasn't the only contentious bit. Audio and video clips became the next battlefield. Prosecutors had recordings, Clenney screaming loud enough that neighbors heard. They said it proved volatility, a pattern, but her lawyers pushed back hard. They argued about privacy, about context. The judge made a compromise. Anything captured at top of her lungs volume would be allowed. But normal conversations were off the table. Then came the elevator footage we showed you a while ago. Pointing at the footage, prosecutors called it a pattern. On the other hand, the defense said it was just one piece of a puzzle. They tried to block it, fearing it would taint the jury. But the judge let it in. And this was another blow. Why would someone so public, so seen, keep letting these pieces fall into place? But you know the trial is still on the go, their verdict is still waiting. And still, as of April 2025, Clenney waits. The trial has been pushed back again and again. Her lawyers blame the prosecutors. They've even filed motions to kick out the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office altogether, saying the earlier iCloud breach was unethical. But no date is on the calendar, no final word, just time ticking away behind bars. And by this time, another drama has kicked in all of a sudden. The lead prosecutor in this case dropped the file, penned a one-page memo, and stepped down. But why would Khalil Quinan, the state's sharpest blade in a courtroom, suddenly back out of a case this explosive? Just weeks before a possible courtroom showdown, the man seeking justice for Christian Obumseli said he had no choice but to walk. What forced his hand? Is it something like the power of opposition or the money? Turns out a judge ruled that Quinan could be questioned, under oath, about private messages he shouldn't have seen. Texts, emails, and sensitive documents were exchanged between Courtney Clenney's defense team and her parents. All that was protected material, and Quinan had eventually read it. He claimed it was a mistake. He also said he didn't know those conversations were confidential. But once the judge decided he could be interrogated about it, Quinan knew he'd become a witness, not the prosecutor. He couldn't fight for the state and defend himself at the same time. So he stepped down. It means the justice has been delayed again. But what exactly was in those messages that triggered this legal earthquake? Turns out that some of those texts outlined the defense's strategy, their entire plan on how to spin the narrative, flip sympathy, and twist the story back in Clenney's favor. It was a digital blueprint of courtroom warfare. That's what the prosecutors accidentally got their hands on. And it doesn't stop there. There is another subtle twist here as well. Clenney and her parents were quietly slapped with charges for a bizarre hacking attempt. Allegedly, they tried accessing Christian's laptop after he was gone. Prosecutors said the messages proved it. On the flip side, the Clenneys said it was all a misunderstanding. Either way, the charges mysteriously vanished. But why were they dropped so fast? Who made that call? The same judge who ruled Quinnan could be deposed, Judge Laura Sharon Cruz, also decided the state had crossed a line. She said the prosecution violated Clenney's attorney-client privilege, even if they didn't know her parents had lawyers at the time. And that's when the dominoes began to fall. With Quinnan gone, the case is now back in the hands of Sean Abuhoff, the original lead who had once built it from the ground up. Now this is a mess, and historically speaking, a messy trial never leads to proper justice, do they? But besides the legal drama, if we look at Courtney's actions and behavior, what do you see? It's clear she was never forced to grow up. There's a consistent lack of accountability and honesty. Outside of her own statements, and her father's, there's little to support any claims that Christian was the aggressive one. If anything, he was patient to a fault. Christian never deserved what happened that night. At just 27 and only a week away from turning 28, his life was cut short. From his texts and letters, you can tell. He loved Courtney deeply and desperately. And he never gave up on people. According to friends and family, he had a brilliant mind, a kind heart, and a bright future. A future that, regardless of the pending verdict, was tragically stolen just because of one toxic relationship. But do you have any idea what really shaped Courtney to be a person like this? What did she crave? What did she lack in her life? Or would you just call her a monster? An extreme level of narcissism? Let us know in the comments below. If you like this video, don't shy away from giving it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Stay safe. See you soon.